Hello and welcome to MyLanguageLabs Get Started Part 1, Plan Your Implementation. My name is Victoria Walker and I am a faculty advisor working out of the state of Kentucky. I live in Midway, Kentucky, and I teach at a small liberal arts college called St. Catherine College here in Kentucky. I also teach Spanish at the community college out of Lexington, Kentucky. So I'm very happy to have you today. And first, I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. You should see, let me make sure that I've got that. Actually, I'm putting you to my desktop, and you should see a welcome message here. And, oh gosh, let me find where that is. Hold on. Here we go. Let me share this file with you. All right, so hopefully everyone can see this. Just welcoming you to the actual call. I would let you know that the session is being recorded, and if you need to leave early or something along those lines, it's no problem. You can always come back and actually listen to wherever you left off when you needed to leave. So it'll be there and archived for you. Also, you have a participant's guide, which has a lot of valuable information contained. You can scroll to the very end, see some important contact information and links and phone numbers and so forth that may help you along the way as well. Now, let's take a look at what we'll be doing here today. And basically, we're going to start with, let me pull this up. It may take me a little while to toggle between some of these items here. And I actually want to show you the agenda. I've shown you the first part of the agenda, but let me go back and find okay, here we go. I want to just show you the actual agenda. If I can pull that over here. And for some reason, here we go. All righty, now you can see, and you have this in your guide as well, but just a quick overview of what we'll be planning to do during this 90-minute session. I'll be talking to you about the PIE, which is a model created by Pearson called Plan, Implement, and Evaluate, and it has everything to do with how to plan, efficiently and effectively plan to implement MyLanguageLab into your curriculum. And from there, we'll go into the different phases. Phase 1 is plan, phase 2 is implement, and then phase 3, of course, would be evaluate. And we will take you through each of those steps as well as have a Q&A period at the very end. But if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to simply raise your hand and ask a question or just speak up. There are just a few of us here, so you can speak up and let me know what your question might be. Now, let me go back to, here we go, and I'm going to enlarge this for you. You'll see the full screen here. So here we go. We're looking at the 10 steps and to a successful implementation, and you'll see the 3 phases basically have 3 steps, except for the third, the evaluate phase, has 4. So, what we're concerned mostly about here during this call, this workshop, would be defining the goals and outcomes that you have. What are the best features to use? And you really need to think about those types of things as you're planning, and then identifying how you're going to measure your success. In other words, kind of pull back away and see the big picture here in terms of planning. If you can do as much of this on the front side, all the better, all right? All right. I'm just scrolling on to the different phases. By the way, I'm using what you're seeing right now is actually I'm going to try to enlarge it this way a little bit, there we go. What you're seeing right now is what we're calling the toolkit, and it's a planning toolkit. So it would be very helpful for you to have this toolkit as well. And let me also mention that after this 90-minute workshop, if you would consider doing an additional about 90 minutes of project work, making concrete application to some of what you're learning today, then you would be eligible for continuing education credits. And it's a wonderful new system that we have that's accredited, and it's something that you might consider as we go along. You don't even have to decide now to do that. You can, even after the fact, do it. But the actual project is putting a little bit of meat to the bones that you're going to get here today, and why not get some credit for it to be able to archive, show to your coordinator, your dean, your department chair, whoever it may be, and that you're actually not just attending, but you're attending and then doing, and that will be validated. It's a graded project and something you might definitely consider doing. All right. So as we come in, we're going to talk a little bit about digital learner outcomes. And, you know, we all have learning objectives and outcomes in our courses, and it's going to vary from institution to institution as far as, okay, these are the goals that I have in this course, and these are the measurable outcomes that are going to be produced as a result of achieving those goals. Well, Pearson has also designed their own 4 particular digital learning outcomes. They call them digital learner outcomes. And they're called that because they're keeping in mind that this is a digital laboratory, and what are the outcomes that we want to have for any user who walks through the digital doors here. And now we're looking at those, and it's a wonderful setup, because you'll find that many of these are going to be helpful for you to achieve the learning objectives and course objectives that you have within your particular class or course that you're developing. So we have accessibility and experience. In other words, how are the learners doing with the product itself, with the laboratory itself? Are they engaged? Are they feeling confident? And some of these you can see are actually qualitative and perhaps not quantitative, but certainly if how they're entering the course and accessing the lab, that's something that we're very interested in. And by the way, that's helpful for me in terms of retention alone. So here, how is it accessible and what the experience is? We want everyone to have a good experience. We want it to be accessible for them, and I want to be able to track who's coming in to the course and when, to the lab and when. The next outcome that they have, learner outcome, would be what kind of progress are they making through the program, how long are they taking, and these are actually all trackable, all right? I can keep track of these as an instructor. This is valuable information for me, not only for retention, but also for end results and pushing students on to the next level. It's very important to me that I have measurable results and that I can look at that in an analytical fashion and evaluative fashion. Then achievement and competence, equally important to me as the instructor. How are they doing on their tests? Are they demonstrating the competencies and the objectives, and are they showing that they've progressed here, and can I measure that? And then what about the skills? What skills have they managed to achieve? What can they do? Can they speak, let's say, Spanish or French or Italian? How do I know that? Starting from day 1 to the very end of the semester or the term, can I see what they've done, and how's that measurable? How can I look at that data and to help me for future courses and classes as well? And then, of course, progression would be, are they ready for the very next level of the course? All right, so those are the digital objectives that we have, and here are some examples of each of those. Okay, we have, let's be specific with them now. Learner can access online when and where they want. Timeliness, they have greater persistence. Competence or standard of achievement, they gain an A or a B. Let's say we're shooting for that. You might even have C depending on your institution. And then learners move up. Okay, these are some just specific examples of these particular digital learner outcomes. Learner can easily register for the course. The learner can complete all the assessments in the course. The learner performance in class assessments, I can take a look at where they are in particular assessments that I've designed for the class. And then in the end, the learner is going to be able to, let's say, get employment. In other words, this is going to be an important part of they complete their degree, they're satisfied, and then they get a job as they move on. Anyway, these are just a few of the examples of types of learner outcomes, of the digital learner outcomes, and what they really mean. Now, we're going to move on into that PI, the phase 1, which was plan, and we're looking at a planning worksheet. All right, so what you'll need to do as an institution, and this is varied because one of you may be the coordinator, another one of you may be an adjunct instructor who has full control and you're designing the course yourself, while another one of you may be someone who is an adjunct instructor but you have no autonomy. In other words, you're being coordinated. So, and I could go on with a variety of scenarios. You can come from different backgrounds and with different privileges. You may design, coordinate, simply teach as a section instructor. We can all be at different levels. So with that in mind, what we're looking at now is that as you're planning for implementation, really no matter who you are, and hopefully there's a lot of collaboration within your division, and you can kind of rub shoulders as you work your way through the planning process, but it's good for you, no matter who you are, to develop some sort of game plan on how you're going to plan your implementation. This particular planning worksheet that you're looking at is in the workbook that you have, and you're going to create a roadmap to what you want to do. And it's not only that you're going to use the MyLanguageLab in some fashion, but we might even say why. Why are you using the lab? What are you hoping to have out of this? Out of using the lab. We're not just going to use the lab for the sake of using the lab. We want to have something concrete in mind. And this particular worksheet will step by step take you through the process of considering the particular goals that you have as you're using MyLanguageLab. And it's intended for you to actually fill it out personally because, again, you're going to have some of these things will apply to you while others may not. But it's very important that you consider these things as you're moving along in the planning stage. Your step 2, even as you begin to consider what features do you want, what are the resources that are available to you that you would most like to use, all right, in your implementation. What are you hoping to do? And you can see there are just so many different possibilities here for you as you scroll your way through the actual process. And then it's a good idea in the planning stage to consider how you're going to measure success. As I already mentioned, what do you want to snag? What data do you want to collect from the implementation, from the lab itself, from the gradebook functions and other reporting functions? What are you after in order to substantiate success and to measure the success? What kind of success metrics are you after? And here are just a few examples. You may want to isolate the homework grades, the scores of quizzes or exams, final course grades. Maybe that's all you're interested in. Maybe you want some averages. Perhaps you want to do some comparisons and correlations as well as a part of your implementation. But it's good to think of these things at the very beginning. You can still consider them, of course, after the semester's over and you're like scratching your head thinking, now, wow, let me go back and look at that. I need to kind of analyze things. Of course, you can do it then as well, but it's much better to have something in place in the planning stage, if possible, in order to have a better implementation, perhaps, if we could put it that way. All right. Now here, going back to the different the goals that you may have, what goals does your institution have, what do you have as a department, as an instructor, and then do the students have any goals? What goals actually do you have for your student? For example, this example is the student takes ownership of learning. Well, yeah, we want all our students to take ownership of learning. Maybe a student goal would be to have the students enter the lab by such and such date, you know, after, let's say, 2 days after launch or something along those lines you can have at the student level as well. They're really kind of your goals, but in reference to the students. So this, again, is something that you would want to consider as you travel along here. All right, so continuing on now, I would like to, you know, it would be good for you to consider what features that we have that to offer within the laboratory that would best go along with your personal course objectives. In other words, let's say that you want your students to speak Spanish better, okay? That's an oral skill, and perhaps even listening, depending on how you look at it, if you want that kind of exchange. But let's say that's your overall course goal. From there, then, what components, what resources, what methods are already there in the online language lab for you that can best help you to achieve the goal of having your students speak Spanish by the end? All right, so that's what, and you know, you need to do that with every single course learning objective that you have. There's probably something in the lab for you that responds to each and every component there, unless it's something like you want your students to go out into the community and have some kind of experiential occurrence where they're, you know, maybe helping at the local food bank, or they're working on a horse farm with migrant workers, and they're actually, you know, and maybe they're keeping a journal of their experiences in the community. Well, you could still create, actually, you could create an assignment, an instructor assignment, where you have them record that, now that I'm thinking of it. But at any rate, what I'm trying to say is there's probably something in the lab, some method, some resource to help you actually assess and measure that particular learning objective. But it's good to think through that now in the beginning stages. And basically you see, what activities can I assign for practice, for a grade, what methods during the term will I use to achieve those objectives and to measure their success, and then what are the tools and functions that I can use to pull the data. So from here, and again, I'm still in the toolkit as I'm going through this. This toolkit is wonderful. I think you're really, really going to enjoy the toolkit. Let's look at some of the, let me see if I can, actually this is giving you all those, but this is what I want. This is the page I want here, where it gives you an example, all right? Let's say that my course learning objective, and again, it's going to vary from institution to institution, from department to department, but basically, when we're talking about a foreign language course, most of us teachers are going to have at least 5 primary objectives for introductory language, foreign language acquisition. We're going to have something to do with speaking, something with listening, something with writing, something with reading, and culture. So those are the 5. Now, how we describe those, how we articulate those in the syllabus, all of that may be different. How much emphasis, how much weight we put on those particular skills, again, may be different. However, for practicality, here's one example. And let's say I want my students to learn foundational grammatical structures, so we're in grammar now, and vocabulary necessary for essential basic comprehension expression in the target language. So in other words, I want the grammar and the vocab here. That's my objective for my students. They're going to be learning about grammar, and they're going to be learning about vocab. They're going to be acquiring grammar. Now, Now, what kind of outcome do I want there? I want them to be able at the end of the term and throughout the term really to apply and display knowledge of mastery of particular structures, let's say for Spanish 101, and vocabulary that we'll find there, and it might be, greetings, typical things like days of the week, months, numbers, colors, those kinds of adjectives, and then we get into maybe describing yourself, family, studies, pastimes, those just very introductory basic topics dealing with grammar, expression, and vocabulary in the target language. So that's the outcome I want them to have. I want them to be able to apply and display knowledge of that. Now, what is within the lab that will help me to achieve those learning objectives? I have auto-graded SAM and e-text assignments. I have quizzes, I have exams, I have interactive drills, I have something called the Amplifier Study Modules, and these are just a few of the sampling resources that I could use in order to assess whether students are actually acquiring vocab and they can apply grammatical concepts in the target language. And then what am I going to use as the success metrics here, the final, to determine did I achieve that goal or not? Well, I'm going to look at their final exam scores because it's comprehensive. So I'm covering all chapters with all vocab and all grammar, and from there I should have a score. Now, I can compare that to other classes. I can compare those scores to midterm scores. I can compare that score to how they were doing along the way. I can do correlations and so forth. There are a lot of different ways we can capture that data and to determine that. But I also need to have, and it probably would have, at least a target here. In other words, I'm going to say, okay, for the final exam scores, I want at least 90% of my students taking the final, and this may vary, and I may say 95% of my students taking the final. I want them to achieve a 70% or higher. All right, now a 70% or higher, I chose that mark because that's the traditional grading system. A 70 is a C. If Spanish is a gen ed course, many institutions require students to have at least a C in order to get credit for that particular course. If they get a D, they have to retake it. So, but you can set that up. You can target yourself whatever you feel is appropriate. Let's look at another example. What if I want them to develop listening and speaking? Okay. Over those same topics for this course, I want them to be able to effectively understand how to speak the target language and about these topics, what they're studying, what they do in their free time, foods they eat, etc., what the family's like, what methods are available in the lab for me to do that. Well, I've got auto-graded SAM and e-text activities again. Instructor-graded voice recording assignments. I can do a live chat. We speak. There are a lot of other assignments that we can do. And then in the end, I have a summative oral interview, and I'm going to make a target on that summative oral interview. How many of my students do I want to achieve at whatever level by the end of the term? And that should help me. Now, I want to go back, and I want to look at let me keep going actually here in the toolkit, and let's take a look at this. In a moment, we're going to look at the specific assignments and activities that are available, and resources and methods that we can use depending on what our particular desire is and our learning outcome is. So here what you have is a wonderful chart that says, hey, we've got some MML, MyLanguageLabs digital solutions here available for you. So if we start with saying, hey, I've got a problem here. My students are not finishing the work on time, okay, and you identify that as a problem or a challenge for you. In whatever course you're teaching, you say, yeah, the students aren't turning in the homework on time. And maybe it's a workbook you're using, or maybe now you're going to use the student activity manual that's available to you within the lab. So from here, you want to say, well, now which is the associated digital learner outcome? Remember, there are 4 of those. I showed you those a moment ago, and they're in your toolkit. What is associated with that particular challenge or problem that I'm having? Well, that would be timeliness, right? And then you're going to say, okay, are there methods or resources in the lab that I can use to track or assess those outcomes? Yes, there are. I can look at student time on task. I can use the roster to see when the student last entered the course. There are tracking devices and mechanisms within the lab that I can use to help me determine, to reach out to those students who aren't entering after so many days. And I can keep a very tight watch on those alerts and notifications, that panel from today's view. As an instructor, I can keep close watch on that, using this as the example. And then those would be part of the solutions that I would have. And then I'm going to be able to set particular targets to measure that. In other words, I'm going to reach out to those students. I'm going to say, hey, by the first week, I'm going to be examining those notifications and alerts, and then I'm going to be reaching out, and this is how I would solve that particular challenge that I'm having. All right, so I wanted you to see that just as a quick reference here for what is available to you within the lab and how to best utilize those particular functions that we have to help you with the outcomes. Now I'm going to scroll back to these particular, there we go, just to give you a bird's eye view very quickly of if you are interested, and we're thinking again, and you have course objectives, and then there are, you've got ways, you've got outcomes that you're going to measure those objectives, but you need to use the laboratory in order to help you achieve those objectives. And how can you do that? For example, if your objective deals with listening comprehension and speaking proficiency, then what things in the lab can you use as methods to achieve the final outcome? You can use machine-graded SAM and e-text activities, the pronunciation guide, WeSpeak, live chat, and these are just a vast array of resources that you can use. Instructor-graded oral practice activities. There's a Versant oral practice test available in the Language Lab. You can create your own oral practice activities if you would like. There are vocabulary tutorials, media share, learning catalytics. Some of these are textbook driven, but many of them are in most of the textbooks, the accompanying labs. Media files for download. You can have your students listening to Spanish often. You can do you can use Blackboard Collaborate for oral interviewing if you'd like. Anyway, that gives you an idea in a kind of very quickly of what's available for you if that's what you're actually testing. If you're testing and your objective is to increase cultural awareness and understanding, what is available within the lab in order to do that? You have a discussion board that you could load, especially if you're teaching online classes or hybrid classes. Students could do cultural posts to the board. It makes for wonderful class discussion, much like what you would have in a face-to-face class. Students could use diaries and journals for their own reflection as they learn. Learning catalytics it kind of brings a clicker system to your face-to-face classroom. You can do that to do quick cultural checks. You can use that with most any topic, really. Media share is another. I used media share in a class where students had to post, they videotaped themselves, and it was like a discussion board format, really, and they did PowerPoint presentations that they uploaded about their cultural topic. Other students then could comment to their posts. In fact, one of the features that's so fun in media share is that if I want to insert a comment or say something about the presentation, it will insert my commentary right at the very point during the video in which that particular instance was going on or mentioned, and it's a really, really neat feature. There's a podcasting site you have embedded that you have available for you within the Language Lab. You've got, of course, social media wikis that you can do. Each text has video series with plenty of auto-graded or machine-graded and instructor-graded assignments. You can use those in order to help you with culture. They're wonderful, like Vistas Culturales in Spanish, and then there's the new Club Cultura that you in some of our Spanish texts that you could also have students watch to enrich their cultural awareness and so forth. There's an interactive globe which has everything like art, newspaper links, and so forth. So there are many items and resources available here within the lab to help you with culture. A few here for your writing, judging students, assessing their writing ability. We have machine-graded, instructor-graded writing assignments. They could do personal journals and diaries. You could even have them do a Google Doc, a shared doc, and have them maybe write skits. I had my students do that also one semester. I put 3 of them in a group, and they had to go ahead and write their skit that they were going to practice to do in class, and they shared and collaborated within, using a Google Doc, and then I was a part, I had privileges in that, so I could kind of go in and take a look at their progress, make sure everyone was on track, and then I could offer feedback. I could also see which students were helping other students as they were learning to write and become better writers in Spanish. What about if we looked at vocabulary acquisition? Again, the list is limited, and I'm going to stop at this point and not continue to go through these, but you can see no matter what your course objective is, there are going to be plenty of resources available within the lab, as well as methods and trackable, measurable type of assessment activities for you to use in order to help you achieve your course objectives. All right, at this point, let's go to, I want to keep on in our toolkit here. I'm going to forward us on, put us on forward. So we've kind of talked about your own personal learning, your course learning objectives and outcomes. We've also touched on the digital learner outcomes they're really, to me, they're woven. They kind of go hand in. They don't even just go hand in hand, but they weave in and out of each other. It's almost one and the same. It's just that we have the 4 learner outcomes, which have specifically to do with the online digital aspect here and implementation. And it's a catch-all. Each of these outcomes is a catch-all for whatever type of problem we might be having or challenge that we're faced with when it comes to foreign language acquisition, no matter whether it's online or face-to-face or hybrid, it doesn't matter. And I like how it's easy to put whatever problem I have into one of those 4 objectives, the outcomes, and then that helps me determine how I'm going to deal with those particular issues that I may be having. And so from there, we've gone to then looking at, these are my my course objectives and outcomes. What does the lab help me do? What resources and methods are there? From here, and it's good to look at all those as you plan. Now, this may be a bit overwhelming to you at this point. Don't worry. What I need you to do, if you're the novice user and you're like, wow, this is my very first semester. I was just talking with a faculty member from San Diego just not an hour ago, and he is brand new to MyLanguageLab. And so what I encouraged him to do is I said, start simple. Start with the very basics. And I said, you would be great to have your section and assign student activity manual activities, load it to the calendar, and that's it. And just do the auto-graded activities at that. So for him and his planning, that's really all he's going to do. He's actually working in a large department with about 20 to 25 instructors who are also teaching introductory level Spanish, and so hopefully he's going to be in more of a collaborative think tank and have an opportunity to work alongside a whole bunch of folks, but they're just using the program and just starting out, and so I encourage them all to start very, very, very simple. Now, you're going to have some it's good to think about what not only quantitative results but qualitative results that you would like to have as you go along. And again, you can see that planning deals a lot with goal setting, right? I mean, that's what planning is. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to have any goals, and you're just basically going to go kind of cattywampus into the term and probably be playing a lot of catch-up and changing things as you go along. So the more time you have that you can invest for planning, the better. even though in a practical sense I understand that that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we get a new course put on us the day before launch, and that's okay too. But as much time as you can invest at the onset and before that, all the better as you go along. It's good to think about what you want to, what goals you have, short and long term, quantitatively as well as qualitatively, right? And by the way, qualitatively, one of the goals that I have for an upcoming course for me, it's an online course, and I want to know what the experience was like for students using the online laboratory. And so I have them at the very end of the course, they'll do a Survey Monkey where they kind of give a ranking system to that, like this is where I would put it, how hard it was, how easy, what I liked, what I didn't like, and so forth. This is valuable information to me as the online course designer and coordinator for the class. I want to know what can I do next term to make it easier for my students and to help them have a better qualitative experience, a quality of experience here. I want that to be very, very good for them. I'm also using that same kind of qualitative measurement for culture, and I asked them at the beginning of the course, mark on a 1 to 5 how much you knew about the Hispanic culture and customs and so forth, geography and all of that, and I kind of list to help them understand the question better. I list several different avenues there for them dealing with culture. And then they put on a 1 to 5, this is where I was at the beginning, but now this is where I am. And I'm shooting for a 1-point incremental increase there. And so, but that's, again, that's kind of qualitative in many ways. So think about what you want to, what goals you may have for your students regarding short and long-term goals. All right, and you have a worksheet. And by the way, these worksheets are all here for you in the toolkit, okay? And even a part of the project. Some of the project would be completion of this. The project, by the way, for the CEU that you can earn is about 90 minutes, and it will be graded and returned to you with a certificate. So, keep in mind that as you're planning, if you just use the worksheets, then you can actually have and turn those in. Then you can substantiate that with completion and earning of a badge and CEUs. So. All right, so now we move into, that's basically the background of Plan 1. It's like, hey, why are we using MyLanguageLab? What are we hoping to achieve by using it? What are problems we're having now that this digital application can help us with and digital implementation can help us with, like, you know, students not turning in homework on time, for example, and how can I track that? Is there something out there that, as an instructor, that will help me and save me time? And if there is, I want to know, and what does the lab have to do with that? And then from there, looking at my individual course learning objectives and what outcomes I'm hoping to have, and what are the resources and the methods that I can use within the lab to help me achieve those. And then pulling back, big picture, I have all of these goals as to why I'm using the online lab, what I'm hoping to achieve, and then linking my course objectives and outcomes with the methods that are readily available for me by having implementation of the lab. And kind of putting all that together, thinking through as well as I can as I'm designing the course, having a big global picture as I move into the implementation stage of it. But even now, we're talking about planning your implementation. So this is still kind of all a part of the planning phase, but it's how we would plan for actually implementing the MyLanguageLabs into the curriculum. All right. So from here, we're going to look. You need to consider, where are you individually? All right. What is your comfort level? The gentleman from San Diego was just coming in, and I didn't ask him about how he felt with technology and so forth, and if he was really a savvy user or not. but I do know he was new to the MyLanguageLab. And so we all come with different backgrounds. We have, different skill sets to add to the equation here. We also are from different institutions. Some institutions allow autonomy, like I mentioned before, and others don't. And you may be under coordinator. If you're a teaching assistant, you may not have the privileges that the full-time instructors may have or faculty may have. Maybe you have a language lab facility where you want all the students to go to on the first day as you bring them, as you help them register and so forth. Some other institutions may not have that. So we're all coming from varied backgrounds, but why not think through this and think through, where are we? Maybe you're the coordinator and you want your adjuncts to take a workshop and to submit the project so that you consider that training for them, all right? So we're all coming from different various backgrounds. We've also given you various things to consider, all right? What concerns do you have? Where are students going to access the language labs? Will they work with your IT folks and with the language lab there if you have one? Who needs to okay your decision to implement MyLanguageLab into your courses? Or do you need departmental permission and so forth? All right, so basically you can go through that worksheet to determine kind of, okay, institutionally, where are we? Are we collaborating or no? Am I a lone ranger? Am I the only one dealing with this? I got hired on as an adjunct and my division chair said, go for it, okay? That may be you. That's been me several times, believe me. So from here, once you kind of look institutionally at where you are, now let's look at where you are individually, all right? So in this case, what we need to do is define who you are, basically. And we've set up three roles, three possible roles as a user for our instructors and so forth. You may be the program designer or coordinator. You may be a section instructor. You may be an instructor and or course designer. All right. In other words, the section instructor could be like a TA or perhaps some of your adjuncts if it's under coordination. And I've been actually all of these. I've been the coordinator for the language at Midway University, and I coordinated 3 adjunct instructors beneath me there. So I was the full-time faculty serving as the designer and the coordinator, and then I had assigned section instructors beneath me who were my adjuncts. All right. I've also taught at the community college where I am the instructor and course designer. I'm the only faculty there, and basically we have 1 or 2 sections of Spanish being offered, so I'm not really coordinating anyone, but I am the designer of the program, and then I'm also teaching from it. All right, so you may be and you know what, by the way, I've also been the section instructor where I've come in under a coordinator already coordinating the program, and that coordinator basically gives me the course ID that I enroll into. I enroll into the course, and I serve as a section instructor. In other words, the course is already set up for me and established, and I just enter into it and basically facilitate that course. So I've actually been all 3 of those, and some of you may fit in that same position. But you can see here that we give you the definitions and so forth of all of these things, as well as some reflection questions that you might want to consider as you're trying to determine, hey, where am I in all of this, and so forth. So let's go into. I want to go into. And again, these are some extra documentations for you available, like setting target dates and implementation. Again, these are all goals again. Training workshops and completing course checklists. All of these things, depending on who you are, you can develop your own personalized implementation path as you go along. Now, the next thing to do, let's say you know who you are and what you have to do with the MyLanguageLabs. You may have to design the template, create the sections. You may have to do both of those things, all right? But no matter what you are, let's say you've got that set away or established. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move into something that's very important, and that would be setting the preferences and as far as the course settings of the lab, as well as best practices that we have as well, which deals with collaborating. If you're fortunate to have a division with other language instructors where you can actually collaborate and discuss some of these things together, all right? Because when you enter into the language lab, just as this gentleman did this morning, one of the things that we needed to do for him, and he needed to learn how to do, was set up his grade book and make sure that the settings were appropriate there. He wanted his students to be able to submit their homework assignments, and that's basically all he was using the lab for, was to collect as a kind of as a collection, a big pool of an average of all of the homework assignments that he was giving, and he wanted to snag that score of an average of homework, the student activity manual assignments that he had thrown to the calendar, and then he wanted to capture that score, and that's how he was going to use it. But I needed to show him how to manipulate a few settings in there, and so he decided that he was going to allow his students to submit it would give them 3 attempts on the assignments, and then he was going to take the highest of those first 3 attempts, and that's what that score, that highest score, would filter into the gradebook column, average of homework. All right, and that basically is the standard defaults that are there. Actually, the default for number of attempts on an assignment is currently unlimited, so you would need to change that if you wanted your students just to have so many attempts, and then you can, it's also currently set to capture the highest of the first of the attempts, like before the due date. That's the way the default is, but you might want to manipulate that. Anyway, that's the type of thing that I'm talking about now when it comes down to choosing and setting your own preferences that you would desire to have. All right, and here we have and I've given this for you. You've got a variety of course preferences that you can scroll through. Like, what time do you want work submitted? Well, the default, and this is probably one of the handiest parts of this toolkit. I love these pages here, several pages about the system default, so I can start thinking, oh, I hadn't thought about when I wanted the students to turn their stuff in, because, in the olden days, all we do is say, hey, it's due today, and they had to turn it in during the class, right? And, they walk into the classroom and they put their composition on your desk, and then they take a seat. So they knew when it was due. But now in the digital world, we can manipulate the due date if we want, and the system default says it's 11:59 p.m. on whatever due date you assign. I've just recently changed that, and I'm choosing a 2 a.m. deadline because some students, there are a lot of non-traditional students, and they come in and they if the assignment's due on a Wednesday, and it's 11:59, but they don't get home until 11:30, and darn, they haven't been able to do their work just yet, and they have to do it, and they had to work longer than they thought, and they've only got 30 minutes to finish the work. It just doesn't give them enough of a buffer, so I've actually increased it a little bit and given my students until 2 a.m., and I mainly did that also when I'm talking with I have 3 kids in college, and they're like, wow, we could really use that extra time, because they're not the students who are doing their work in advance, even though that's the ideal student, right, who's like a step ahead of everything. But many of our students are, they're running at the last minute. So you may want to change that. Anyway, that's an example of just look at all these different things that you can consider as you're setting your own preferences in the course. You want to accept late work or not? You're going to give any grace, all right? There's a wonderful grace option setting within the course within the lab that you may want to use. Again, we talked about some of these, like how many attempts do I allow, what goes to the grade book. Let's see, there's lists of them. Feedback, when do we show the correct answer? You can set all of these. It's wonderful to have collaboration and discuss it. Or If you don't have, you're the Lone Ranger teacher, hey, stick with the system defaults, because who do you think designed those system defaults? It was a big group of experienced faculty across the United States who got together and said, yeah, this is the best practice. So consider these defaults best practice kind of across the United States, the faculty using it who've used it a long time. So you don't have to make any changes if you don't want. If that's kind of an overwhelming thought to you, hey, stick with the defaults, you'll be fine. All right. Anyway, that gives you an idea of what you can do. Collaborating, all the better, but if you can't, you've got the defaults here for you. All right, and that gives you, whoops, I've gone a little bit too far here, but that gives you some great food for thought here. All right, now let's say you know how you want your settings, all right, and how you're going to grade all the different things that you're going to put in there. From there, what we're going to go to is we're going to talk about what are the actual MyLanguageLab tools that we can use in order to help me make sure that I'm achieving those learner outcomes. And let's see, this is a worksheet from the toolkit. Let me see if I can't find that. I'm looking for a particular, hold on here. Yeah, this is it. All right. So here we have, you want to consider some of your learner outcomes that you have, and what are the things that you can use in order to measure those. So for example, we have one of the learner outcomes is, remember, it's accessibility and experience. Okay, so let's look at, I want to measure my student enrollment, and I know that that's critical in the first 3 weeks of the course. In a traditional, course of 16 weeks. If it's accelerated, oh my, I would put the first week. It's critical to have students on board that first week. So how can I measure whether or not my students are entering the course? All I have to do is within the grade book, I can check the roster. I can say, okay, I've got 25 students registered for my class. This is, let's say it's a face-to-face class, and I've got all these students coming to class. But I go check the roster on my language lab, and there are only 15 who are actually already enrolled and registered. So I can cross-reference those two, and then I can go to those other 10 students and say, hey, you're not in the lab. What's going on? You haven't enrolled yet, and you need to get in there. What can I do to help you? Some students are going to say, well, I don't have my financial aid yet. I can't buy it. Well, there is a way that your students can get provisionary access, and then that can transfer over. It's like a temporary access of sorts. So you need to contact the Pearson folks and support to help, to give you instructions on how to do that. But that is a possibility. That's a way that you can help students. What can they do in the meantime? They can be memorizing the vocab and so forth. At any rate, you can email and isolate those 10 students who haven't enrolled by the first week, and you can do that incrementally and until you kind of talk to them face-to-face and say, look, you got to get on, all right? And, of course, I would offer, I think a best practice would be to offer some grace during this period as students are transitioning into their online laboratory. You want to help them with that as much as you can as they're transitioning in. So again, that's one example. Then the other thing is going to be their student activity. There are systems set in place, trackers, notifications, and alerts that are there for you where you can check the idle students. By the way, that's a setting, a course setting that you can say, hey, I want to know, tell me, machine, when students haven't entered the course in 4 days. For my traditional course, I set it up at 4 days because I figured, okay, if things are due on Monday and Wednesday, I'll snag them if they haven't come in by if they haven't come in by Monday and things are due, hey, they're not entering their lab enough as far as I'm concerned. You may say 2 days. You may say, I don't know what setting you want, but again, that is a preference that you can set. So I can use this digital lab to help me achieve the outcome of I want to know if my students are doing their work. I want to know who's turning in assignments past due. And I'm going to use that as a red flag and for retention purposes, and then I'm going to reach out to those particular students and email them. Believe me, I have emailed the long litany. It'll give you a list of assignments that have not been turned in and which student they are. And I've emailed those to the students, say, look, you got all these things due. What's going on? And then they say, oh, my grandmother's in the hospital or whatever. I'm having a hard time getting on. And then, okay, we develop a plan, a strategy. Okay, you tell me when you're going to be able to do these and how can I help you and so forth and so on. So anyway, this chart you may really find helpful with specific examples of how to use the digital tools that are there in order to achieve those objectives for you. And by the way, this is a part of the third phase as we're into to evaluation. All right, now we're into evaluation. In other words, we've done our planning and goal setting and collaboration. Then we go into the actual implementation, and most of that implementation is going to be taking our course learning objectives and using resources, methods, tools and features of the Language Lab in order to achieve those learning objectives, and they're going to be measurable in the end. And then that's where most of our work is going to be spent, is in connecting the dots from learning objectives to outcomes, and in the middle of that is the meat of what we're using the lab for and why we're using the lab in order to reach those measurable outcomes. And so that's a part of the implementation planning, is determining which assignments we're going to use in order to achieve those particular goals and to have measurable outcomes. And then from there we're going to discuss what are the actual course preferences, assignment preferences, and settings that we feel comfortable with as faculty, as professionals, that we want for our students in using this digital technology, and as well as the alert system that is there for us to help us, to save us time as instructors, and to help us retain our students during the process of using this technology. So that's kind of the planning, the implementation, and now we're into evaluation, and we came back around to the digital learner outcomes because those are measurable, all right? They're designed to be measurable by using these features within the lab to help us track student accessibility and experience, the timeliness and completion of all these things we've now assigned, right, in order to the methods and the assignments that we have in place to achieve our learning objectives and to have positive results in the end and to achieve all of our goals. Then, how can we track those digitally? And that's why we're returning to those again, because these are a part of the evaluation process as well. The third learning objective, you'll remember, was achievement and competence. So we're looking at scores on their assignments. Again, it's very critical to examine those scores in the first couple of weeks because students are just getting used to using the actual laboratory online and submitting a student activity manual assignment or maybe doing an e-text assignment and so forth. So we want to be able to look at those scores very early on as well as throughout the term to make sure that they're achieving what we're after. You can easily check through gradebook function or even through today's view, the report, the course and student reporting. You can see by a particular assignment, where's the low ball here? Let's say you look at a couple of assignments and they're all really high averages for your entire course, your student, all the students within the course, and then suddenly you see one that you're like, huh? Why did this one go down? Well, that is an indicator to you. It's wonderful for a flip model approach because it's an indicator to you that students are having problems with this. So you go in there and you look at that and you allow the results that you're seeing to influence how you teach the next day, because you're going to take what the students aren't getting. You're going to see that very quickly. They're having trouble with adjective agreement, and they did well on such and such and such and such, but they really stumbled on this activity, and all the students, I can see their answers, and they're putting this on there. I need to talk about that with them in class because I don't want them duplicating that on their higher stakes chapter exam. So you can use the lab as a wonderful tool to help you plan your lesson each day based on how students are doing on their homework assignments and so forth. And then the fourth learning objective we have here was the progression. And this, of course, these would be statistics that you might take at the middle of your term and then certainly at the end. All right. All right, let me show you. I'm going to actually now switch our screen. I'm going to go out of the toolbox for a moment, and I'm going into, I'm already inside, well, I've been timed out, but let me get back into my course here. And I want to show you a few of the features that can help you, just as an example, as I was talking about a moment ago. Whoops. Just go into Mosaicos. All right, here's the section, or here's the template here. And let me take a look at it. So you can see here's the today's view, and this is my notifications panel right here where my cursor is. And from here we go to, of course, this is the welcome message, which, by the way, is customizable. You can customize that, and if you don't want them, you might change that because you don't want the welcome. Well, here's the welcome message. Actually, it's blank. So when students click on welcome message, they're going to see nothing because I've not written anything for this class. But you can write a welcome message there and, tailor it to them. The default is about this course, and in that case, you're going to see all of this information. But at some point, you're not going to want them to see this over and over and over again, so you might consider changing that. You can put it to the welcome message, but then change the content of the welcome message and put important announcements there if you want. But this is what I'm after right here for you. It's the alerts. So here you can see how many students have not passed an activity, who are the idle students. But now this has got to be set by you because the system default on idle students, I'm not remembering correctly, I'm not sure if I am, but I think it might be a week. And I changed that because I want to know what students haven't entered in by 4 days, not a week. I want a little bit earlier intervention there. Personally, who submitted something past the due date, who did not submit the work even though the due date is gone, what students haven't read the comments. Like if I've done some instructor grading assignments and I've written comments on there, I love this feature, it tells me who's not reading the comments that I write them. If I'm going to spend so much time giving them feedback, by golly, I want them to read it. So now I can say, hey Joe, do you know you haven't read my comments? I wrote you a lot of nice little notes there. I want you to go read those so you can learn and apply your, learn from your mistakes and make corrections to the drill for the next time or whatever. All right, and then and then here's the performance aspect, the course performance as well as student performance. So you can click on course and give you a view of this here quickly, and it's going to give you overall, look, it's all broken down for you by chapter, how much content has been completed and how much time on average has been spent on each task. So it's very helpful information. Of course, you can do it by the student as well. And again, this is wonderful retention. You can look at this score for those students you're worried a little bit about and see how they are very quickly this way. All right, so this is an example of how we are using, we have a digital learner outcome in this case, although we have that also as instructors, to retain our students and to measure their success, measure how they're doing, and we can easily do that with some of the features that are available here for us. All right, as far as next steps, we're just nearing the end here of our workshop. I would encourage you to take the next part 2 of the Getting Started series, and you can choose whether you want to do the coordinator designer Getting Started part 2 or section instructor. And I would encourage you to continue to sign up for those as you see fit or as you have need. All right. I would pause to see if there are any questions, any reflection now, as far as any commentary that you might have. This would be the time for a little bit of a Q&A. And then I want to show you one other thing within our. If I can go back and find where that is. Hold on. Nope. Oh, how did I lose that? Nope. G. All right. I sort of lost sight of this, so I don't know what page we were on, but oh, I was way past that. Whoop. All right. Yeah, I'm back into the appendix here at this point. I wanted to show you something really cool. I think you'll like it. We've created also a countdown for you. And it's just a general, but it is a 3-month out countdown now. I know you may not have 3 months, but in an ideal scenario, and this makes a great review for what we've discussed here today during the workshop, where if you can do this 3 months out, all the better. But even if you can't, you can still use this as a quick checklist of, oh, I need to do this, 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 and this as I'm getting started and I have to start teaching tomorrow. All right, you can still use this. Don't be so concerned about the time, but this is just the best practice of how to approach implementation and plan for your implementation. All right, so we've set the big goals. All right, and then we set course goals. All right, that's a part of the initial planning. Then we've chosen those MyLanguageLab features that are going to best help me achieve the learning objectives that I have. And then we're going to decide in advance, right, how I'm going to measure success, because I need to have something measurable for each objective, each learning objective I have. I'm not going to say, hey, I'm not going to throw if I'm teaching online and I throw a discussion board up there just for the sake of a discussion board, but it has no intrinsic value, or I'm not going to measure it in some way, or it doesn't meet, it has nothing to do with any of my objectives, then why even put it up there? So you may begin to think about, why am I assigning what I'm assigning, and how's it linked to my actual course goal, my course goals and objectives. All right, so begin thinking about that early on. Then about 2 months in, you're going to start planning for your implementation, right? Because that's the second component here. We have PIE, plan, implement, and then evaluate. So we're going to plan for implementation. And now we're going to talk about technology. And everyone's going to be different here. You know, if I'm teaching, and the delivery mode of the class is going to influence how you might fill out this sheet as well. You may have to create your course. If you're designing an online course, maybe you have to put it all in Blackboard, link over to MyLanguageLab. You know, or maybe you can do everything over in MyLanguageLab. Maybe your gradebook has to come from your LMS. Maybe your gradebook can be all in MyLanguageLab. So there are exponential number of ways we could look at this, but just some things to consider. You can cross out the ones that don't really apply to you, all right? But it's a great semester launch checklist as you're planning for implementation. And then, of course, you're going to have to know what is your role, because if you're the course designer, you better get started a little bit earlier, right? Because you're going to design the entire course, set up the template, and give your teaching assistants their section ID numbers for their enrollment, for their students. So you would need to start a little bit sooner, but you got to know who you are first, because that will dictate how you proceed from there. Hopefully you're going to then consider what are the settings, preferences that are most important to you. Maybe you can collaborate here. If not, you can use the default settings that are already there. And then you're going to plan in advance. How am I going to measure success? What am I going to take as summative snapshot here that would best illustrate success of each of my learning goals and objectives? All right, then finally we're at the 1 month mark. Now it's time to create my template. Since I kind of have all those things ironed out, I know what I'm going to do in the lab and what features I'm most interested in. And from there I'm going to have my master template. I'm going to make sure all my settings are there. I'm going to assign all the activities that I want before I create my sections. I'm going to go ahead and formulate my grade book and have it all set up and established appropriately. I'm even going to, because I'm coordinating, I'm going to set up some instructor orientation, or if I'm teaching by myself, I'm going to watch some of those orientation videos that are designed just for me as the instructor. I'm going to look at the user's manual. I'm going to look at the help, you know, in order to find, if I have questions, I'm going to go to those resources that are there. I'm going to peruse them and see exactly what I'm dealing with and how can I best orient myself to the course, or how can I best orient my adjunct instructors to the course and what I'm going to require them to do. Then I'm going to prepare for that first day of class. I'm going to encourage for student orientation. By the way, there's a folder under course materials in your lab, that has assignable student orientation videos, and I do assign those. I load those to the course calendar. I don't assign them for a grade, but I do assign them so that students can know, how do I insert an accent on a word, or how do I submit this assignment? And anyway, they're very brief videos that will help the students, and that certainly is a best practice, and I want to make sure that that's loaded to my template. All right. Then I'm going to have my plan in mind as I think about that first week and all my at-risk students, and is everybody on board, and have I got everyone enrolled in their online language laboratory and so forth. And I want to have a plan in place already to help them, okay? All right, so let me see. I think that at this point, I so appreciate your involvement in our workshops. These workshops are held throughout the semester, the rest of the summer and the semester. I encourage you to take the next one in the progression. You may also, in your participation guide, you'll see that there are many helpful links. Also, if you're interested in completing the required project in order to earn the CEU credit, all of that is detailed for you. The how-tos and so forth are detailed for you in your participants guide. And when we close out this workshop, up will pop from your screen a SurveyMonkey survey. We really would appreciate your constructive feedback on this particular workshop. What was helpful to you? What would you like us to do differently? What information was, what's the big takeaway for you? What are you so excited about, and so forth? We want your feedback on the information that we've shared here regarding getting started and planning for your implementation at your institution. So we would greatly appreciate your participation in that survey. Now, if there are no further questions, then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording on this, and I do encourage you to use the additional resources and links found in the toolkit, as well as your participants guide for this particular workshop. And there's so much information there. I know we've covered a lot, but you can also reach out to me at my personal email is thewalker1@outlook.com, and my phone number also is 502-320-1067. That's my personal professional work cell phone, so you can call me or text me, and I can be of some support and help to you. I would greatly enjoy doing that. And again, you may just want to shoot me a quick email about some question that you may have, but I'd be very happy to discuss any of these items with you, as well as other possible topics as well. But I wish you the best of success as you plan for implementation, and with all the MyLanguageLab aspects, don't hesitate to reach out to Pearson or to the faculty advisors. We're so happy to help you, and we're eager to help you, and that's what we're here for. So blessings on your upcoming term, and I wish you the best of success. All right, bye-bye.